Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has once again sent a loud reminder to China: end your salami slicing and resolve border issues at LAC for resumption in bilateral ties. India has enforced a near-total ban on direct Chinese flights and visas after the 2020 Galwan Valley clashes. During a meeting at the SCO Summit in Astana, Kazakhstan, Chinese FM Wang Yi personally made calls for resumption in normal ties. Jaishankar responded by saying, "No thank you." Jaishankar made it clear that Chinese PLA must pull back and respect India's sovereignty first, as well as respect the pre-2020 status quo ante at the LAC. EM posted on X saying, quote, "Discussed early resolution of remaining issues in border areas, agreed to redouble efforts through diplomatic and military channels to that end. Respecting the LAC and ensuring peace and tranquility at the border areas is essential," unquote. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi had snubbed the China-led SCO by refusing to attend in person. This at a time when Chinese lifelong ruler Xi Jinping, along with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, attended in person. When India was reeling under the COVID pandemic in 2020, that spread from Wuhan in China and caused millions of deaths and destruction around the world, the Chinese troops sneaked in and occupied previously neutral territory. PLA continues to remain in two regions, Demchok and Depsang, along the LAC in Ladakh. Jaishankar made it clear that there will be no normal resumption of direct flights, tourism or trade unless China learns to respect India's territorial sovereignty. Earlier, Wang Yi indirectly urged India to resume bilateral tourism and end trade hurdles by saying, quote, "We must adhere to positive thinking. On the one hand, properly handle and control the situation on the border area. On the other hand, actively resume normal exchanges, promote each other and move towards each other," unquote. Beijing is desperate for resumption of tourism from India. Chinese tourism sector has struggled to pick up post the pandemic as foreigners don't want to travel to China. Nearly 800,000 Indian tourists visited China in 2019 and that figure is almost down to zero. Nearly 200,000 visas were granted by India to Chinese nationals in 2019 and that figure is down to nearly 2,000. China wanted India to accept the new normal at the LAC. India is responding by a new normal in diplomatic and bilateral ties. In the first high-level India-China talks under Prime Minister Modi's third term in office, Jaishankar told Beijing that priority is, quote, "need to redouble efforts to achieve complete disengagement in eastern Ladakh." Both sides also agreed for an early resolution of remaining issues in the border areas. A few days ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping got nostalgic. He hailed the 1954 Panchsheel Agreement between India and China as a cornerstone for bilateral ties. But New Delhi remembers how China violated the Panchsheel Agreement first by completely occupying Tibet in 1959 and then attacking India and occuping Aksai Chin in 1962. At the SCO Summit, it was Jaishankar's turn to remind China of the three principles that will and must guide India-China relations from here on. Foreign Ministry statement read, quote, "Agreed that the working mechanism on consultation and coordination on India-China border affairs should hold an early meeting." EM reiterated that India-China relationship is best served by observing the three mutuals: mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual interests, unquote. While the Chinese refuse to end their salami slicing at the LAC, India has hit back diplomatically where it hurts. India has restored 30 ancient names for Tibet, a reminder to the world that Tibet remains under Chinese occupation. Global powers are guilty of abandoning the plight of the Tibetan people and the Tibetan cause for the cost of cheap shoes made in Chinese factories. India also recently allowed a US Congress delegation to meet the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala in what was a major boost to the Tibetan cause and an official recognition from Washington against Chinese occupation of Tibet. China has also been rattled by India's new military alliances like the Quad security partnership with USA, Australia and Japan. CCP is also apprehensive of India's growing defense partnerships with ASEAN nations, as was evident in the Chinese statement, which seeks India to disengage from such defense alliances. Wang Yi stated that India must follow an independent foreign policy and that the two Asian neighbors will work together to resist camp confrontation. However, it is China which first formed a camp with Pakistan to work against India's interests. The CPEC corridor launched in 2015 blatantly violates India's territorial integrity. as it passes through POK, which is legally Indian land under illegal Pakistani occupation. This resulted in India boosting Quad alliances and forging deeper defense ties in ASEAN with the likes of Philippines, Vietnam and Taiwan. So why did Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi skip the SCO Summit? Modi's absence from the summit has raised eyebrows in diplomatic circles and is being in some corners as a bid to play down the significance of the SCO meet. While Prime Minister Modi snubbed Xi Jinping-led SCO, he instead will travel to Russia soon for a meeting with Vladimir Putin. India-Russia bilateral trade has reached a historic high. It remains to be seen if Prime Minister Modi can convince Putin to end the war in Ukraine. Russia and China, meanwhile, have forged a deep alliance amidst tensions with West and NATO. It remains to be seen if Putin can play a crucial role in resolving India-China differences. So far, 21 rounds of border talks and Corps Commander level talks have been held at the Chushul-Moldo border point, but they have failed to break the deadlock. The 2020 Galwan Valley clashes marked the most serious border conflict between India and China in recent memory and resulted in deaths on both sides. In fact, these were the first Chinese deaths in combat in decades. Since then, the nuclear-armed nations have fortified positions and deployed extra troops and equipment along the border. However, India remains an important overseas market for China, while both nations are also members of the BRICS and the SCO. Meanwhile, India's defense and diplomatic ties with the United States are booming. This is a real cause of concern for the PLA as it remains incapable of challenging the US military might in the Indo-Pacific. India's pushback with the Tibet issue and closer ties with Taiwan also indicates that at some level, New Delhi is ready to dump the so-called One China policy if Beijing fails to respect India's territorial sovereignty. Now, all eyes will turn to Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, who are set to have an ice-breaking meeting at the BRICS Summit in Moscow in September this year. The biggest question remains, can India trust China? And is it time to dump the so-called One China policy if China fails to respect India's territorial integrity? Leave a comment, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.